I spent 18 years believing my parents would eventually regret the cold, rainy evening they pushed a terrified 12-year-old girl out of the car and said, "Grow up and find your own way home." They drove away into the dusk, taillights fading, convinced that a harsh lesson in tough love would break my spirit and make me compliant. Instead, it taught me the single most valuable lesson of my life: how to survive without them. I never walked back through their front door. I never called. I disappeared into a life they knew nothing about. But nearly 2 decades later, when they desperately needed a savior, they somehow tracked me down, expecting the frightened child they abandoned. They had no idea that the girl they left on the side of the road had grown into their worst nightmare. Welcome back to BT Revenge Tales, where toxic bridges don't just burn, they explode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. My name is Chloe Miller, and I'm 32 years old today. But to truly understand who I am, you have to go back 2 decades to a dark, rain-soaked shoulder of Route 9. Growing up, I wasn't the favorite child. That title belonged entirely to my younger brother, Leo. While Leo was showered with praise for simply existing, I was treated like an inconvenient roommate. The constant refrain from my parents was that I was entitled and needed to be broken. The breaking point came on my 12th birthday. We were driving back from dinner, a dinner where Leo had thrown a tantrum and ruined the night, yet somehow I was blamed for pouting. When I finally defended myself, my father slammed on the brakes. The tires shrieked against the wet pavement. My mother unlocked the back door, turned around in her seat, and sneered, "Grow up and find your own way home." Before I could even process the words, my father grabbed my arm and shoved me out into the pouring rain. The heavy door slammed shut. I stood there, drenched and trembling, watching their red taillights disappear into the gloom. They left a 12-year-old girl on a deserted rural road, 15 miles from home, with zero money and no coat. They thought fear would force me to crawl back, weeping and obedient. Instead, I turned my back on those taillights and started walking in the opposite direction, toward the nearest gas station, and straight toward my Aunt Clara. I never looked back. When I reached that gas station, shivering and soaked to the bone, the cashier let me call my Aunt Clara. Clara was my mother's older sister, but they couldn't have been more different. Within 20 minutes, Clara pulled into the lot, wrapped me in a warm blanket, and listened in horrified silence as I explained what happened. That night, Clara took me home. When my parents finally called her 2 days later, not out of worry, but to demand I return home to face my punishment, Clara unleashed 20 years of pent-up fury. She threatened to call Child Protective Services and file formal abandonment charges unless they legally surrendered custody. Preferring to save face rather than admit their cruelty to the world, my parents signed away their rights. They washed their hands of me out of pure spite, convinced I'd amount to nothing. They couldn't have been more wrong. With Clara's unwavering support, I channeled every ounce of pain into relentless ambition. I threw myself into my studies, earning a full ride to university, followed by an honors degree in finance. By 27, I had established myself in commercial real estate development. During all those years, I maintained absolute radio silence, completely erasing my parents and Leo from my life. While I was quietly building my empire, my parents were busy destroying theirs. Without me around to serve as the family punching bag, all their toxic focus shifted entirely onto their precious golden child, Leo. Leo grew up accustomed to second chances and zero accountability. My parents drained their retirement savings to fund his endless string of terrible ideas, failed startup concepts, luxury cars he couldn't afford, and high-risk stock trades that went nowhere. Every time Leo sank, my parents threw him a financial lifeline, blind to the fact that he was dragging them down with him. By the time I turned 32, Leo's ultimate disaster struck. He had convinced our parents to put their family home, the very house I was raised in, up as collateral for a high-interest private loan to fund a fraudulent crypto venture. When the venture collapsed overnight, the lenders came collecting. Leo went into hiding, leaving my aging parents holding the bag for nearly $300,000 in debt. Facing imminent foreclosure, total financial ruin, and the humiliating prospect of losing everything they owned. My parents panicked. They were desperate for a savior, and that was when they remembered the daughter they had discarded 20 years ago. It turned out my promotion to senior partner at a major real estate investment firm had made the local business journal. That was how they found me. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my assistant called through the intercom, sounding thoroughly confused. Chloe, there's an elderly couple in the lobby claiming to be your parents. They don't have an appointment, but they refuse to leave. My heart didn't even race. I simply adjusted my blazer and walked out to meet them. Standing near the floor-to-ceiling glass windows were two aging, tired-looking people I barely recognized. My mother wore a faded coat, her eyes red, while my father looked stooped and defeated. The second my mother saw me in my tailored suit, she rushed forward, opening her arms as if 18 years of silence had never happened. Oh, Chloe, look at you. She cried, her voice trembling with forced emotion. We always knew you'd do amazing things. I stepped back, keeping my expression entirely cold. Can I help you? I asked. My father cleared his throat, pulling out a crumpled stack of legal papers. Chloe, we're losing the house. Leo made a mistake, and we need $250,000 by Friday. We raised you, and family helps family. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply took the crumpled documents from my father's trembling hands and scanned them with trained precision. The arrogance of it was staggering. After nearly 2 decades of absolute abandonment, they had walked into my office demanding $250,000 as if it were a debt I owed them. I'll look into this, I said, keeping my voice utterly devoid of emotion. Leave your contact information with my secretary. My mother let out a loud breath of relief, convinced her desperate tears had softened my heart. They left believing their golden meal ticket had just saved them. The moment the elevator doors closed, I got to work. A quick review of the foreclosure papers revealed that the distress mortgage on their property was held by a regional lending institution that worked directly with my real estate firm. They were eager to offload non-performing assets. Using a private subsidiary company I owned, I made the bank an immediate, full-cash buyout offer for the deed and the defaulted loan. Within 48 hours, the paperwork was signed. I didn't just help manage their debt. I officially became the sole owner of the house they had kicked me out of 20 years ago. 2 days later, I summoned my parents and Leo to my corporate office under the pretense of finalizing the paperwork. They arrived strutting with unearned confidence, Leo smirking as if he had single-handedly solved the crisis. My mother practically floated across the room, placing a heavy hand on my desk. We knew we could count on you, Chloe. Family always comes first. I sat back in my leather chair, perfectly composed, and slid a thick blue folder across the polished mahogany table. Sign on the last page, I instructed softly. My father snatched up a pen, eagerly turning to the back, but Leo, suspicious by nature, began reading the header. His face drained of color. Wait, what is this? Leo stammered, his voice cracking. This isn't a debt payout agreement. This is an official notice of lease termination and immediate eviction. My mother gasped, lunging toward the desk. Chloe, what have you done? I looked her dead in the eye, my voice as cold as steel. I bought your debt, Mother. I own the house, and you have 30 days to get out. When she burst into hysterical tears, screaming that I was a heartless monster, I leaned forward and delivered the truth. You told me to grow up and find my own way home 20 years ago. I finally found it and now it's mine. The aftermath was as swift as it was absolute. My parents tried to contest the eviction, but the law was entirely on my side. Within 30 days, they were forced to pack up their belongings and move into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment that Leo had to pay for with his newly acquired second-shift factory job. For the first time in his life, my brother was forced to work for a living, and my parents had to face the bitter reality of the monster they had created. I didn't demolish the family home, Nor did I sell it off for a quick profit. Instead, I had the entire property renovated and transferred the title into a revocable trust dedicated to funding Aunt Clara's retirement and care. The house that once represented cold rejection and neglect was transformed into a lasting monument of unconditional love and protection. Standing beside the road at 12 years old, drenched in the rain, I thought my life was over. But standing in my office today, looking out over the city skyline, I realized that cruel night was actually the beginning of my freedom. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories on BT Revenge Tales.